Hi, this is Teresa Martin from Lower Cape TV. And today's COVID Conversations, we're here with State Senator Julian Cyr. Hi, Julian. Welcome.
Hi, Teresa. Thanks for having me.
Julian is serving as the point person and spokesperson for the Cape Cod Reopening Task Force. And today we're going to dig into a little bit about what this is and what it means. So, Julian, I was wondering, maybe we could look at this from a who, what, when, where, why, and sometimes how perspective. Just to kind of frame it, because it's a lot going on. Can you tell us first what was actually set up? What is the what here?
So this is a partnership and a collaborative effort between the Cape and Islands legislative delegation, led by Sarah Peake and me, but all members of the delegation: Tim Whalen, Randy Hunt, Dave Vieira, Will Crocker, Dylan Fernandez, and then the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce and Barnstable County, with participation from Cape Cod Healthcare, all 15 municipalities in Barnstable County. So there's 4 town managers who are serving on the task force, as well as representatives of the Selectmen and Councilors Association. And then some other key stakeholders are participating as well. Brian Carlstrom, who's the superintendent for the National Park Service and the Cape Cod National Seashore. And what this is a collaborative effort so that we can all be pulling in the same direction as it relates to reopening. Our aim is twofold. We need to save lives and we need to save livelihoods. And I believe that the best way that we can do that is by having consistent policies across the region, and really, I think, consistent messaging and information that's going out to the public, whether that be our residents, year-round residents and seasonal residents, and then ultimately visitors when we're able to welcome them. So this is the entity that's coordinating all of that. Yep, go ahead.
So when was this set up and over what period is it doing its work?
So this was set up in recent weeks. We're sort of in week 2 of the full task force meeting twice a week, having regular press advisories that I know you, Teresa, were participating in. And we're going to be at it for the foreseeable future. A lot of this is we are taking our cue from Governor Baker. The governor and his administration really are going to be setting the rules of the road for reopening. And what our job is to take that information to make sure that we're disseminating that out to the various authorities that we have, and that we're speaking with one message and one voice. The other chunk of work that we've been doing is elevating the interests and needs and questions of Cape Codders up to the governor, up to the reopening advisory board that the governor has established, that's going to be kind of laying out the roadmap to reopening. So we've also done that, although that work is wrapping up as we expect on May 18th, that the governor will release guidelines around reopening.
Could you rattle off a list of who is on this committee, just so that people kind of know who the players are?
Sure. So, it's the delegation. So if you're a state elected official on Cape Cod, you're on it. It's the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, led by Wendy Northcross. It's Barnstable County, particularly Sean O'Brien, who's the Director of Health and Environment for the county, and a number of his staff. The county administrator, Jack Units, participates. Christy Senatori from the Cape Cod Commission. Mike Loff from Cape Cod Healthcare is represented. We actually have a subgroup, a medical health subgroup that advises the group. Brian Carlstrom, I mentioned earlier. There's several stakeholders representing. The Realtors Association has a seat on it. There's a few other industries that are represented. Though most of the business community, what the chamber has done is they've created 19 different subgroups on almost every kind of topic you can imagine, from accommodations to restaurants to office space. All of those are also being included. Actually, if you go to senatorcyr.com/reopening, there's a full list of the members on the task force. We've got Cindy Horrigan from Cape Cod Children's Place, who's on the task force helping us advise, particularly for the needs for young children and families, which childcare is going to be so important for us to figure out when we're able to reopen.
Well, I think it's helpful if people know who they are, because they might have a particular issue and they might know someone on the list, and they might be able to go to them and say, this is important to us. So knowing who they can talk to, in addition to you, of course, is very helpful.
And it's always challenging when you're creating, when you're sort of pulling these together, because, in an ideal world, you'd have everyone you could conceive of, and it would be a list of 190 people, right, which would not really be terribly functional. And so what we've done, though, through these subgroups is a really good way for us to get accurate feedback from what's going on the
Mhm.
ground.
Why do we need this in addition to the state reopening committee?
So, Cape Cod is a place that, when you look from a governmental, structure, there's not kind of one entity in control here, right? There isn't a mayor of Cape
Hmm.
Cod. We have 15 distinct municipalities. We are fortunate to have county government, which has been very helpful for us, particularly the aid to local health. But much of their work and role is advisory. We do have sort of a single healthcare provider, at least from the hospital level, in Cape Cod Healthcare. Of course, we have our community health centers and also providers who practice
Hmm.
independently. But because there isn't sort of one source, one authority, or one sort of source of information, we felt it was really important that we all get on the same page, we all have the same message, and then we're putting that message out to the public, whether that first be year-round residents. Also, I think more immediately, seasonal residents. People are returning here, whether you're a snowbird, whether you're a seasonal resident, whether you're someone who owns a second home here, whether you're a seasonal worker. We've got to get information out to you. I think there was a lot of concern around population influx early on in this
Hmm.
process. Around mid-March, there was a lot of concern about a noticeable influx in population that we were seeing. I mean, I saw it in Truro when I went to the post office.
Yeah.
And people were anxious about it. And there was even an effort, sort of close the bridges petitions, which we actually couldn't do even if we wanted to do. These are federal assets. You need to declare martial law. But to those concerns, actually, people, it seems, really followed the guidelines and protocols that were in place around social distancing, around isolation, around doing a 14-day quarantine if you came here. And we broadly didn't see community spread from that sort of wave one of population influx. And so now, as we're in wave two and in subsequent waves of population influx, we need to make sure that we're doing just as good of a job getting that information out to the public, whether or not we're going to be able to truly keep our communities safe and limit community spread, and whether or not we're going to be able to reopen when it's safe to do so, following the governor's rules, is in large part going to be up to all of us and up to our behaviors. And if you've got when you're dealing with a population that isn't a fixed population or isn't necessarily sort of here year round, and even for folks who are here year round, a lot of people don't sort of get the difference between Truro and Eastham or Yarmouth and Mashpee. They really think of this place as Cape Cod. And so we've got to all be pulling in the same direction with the same message to keep everyone safe.
Well, for public health, it's such a different scale issue in the summer. Like Wellfleet, for example, goes from roughly 3,000 people to 30,000 people. I mean, it's just the scale is just so incredibly different, and the techniques you would use would be so incredibly different. Is that one of the things that this task force is going to provide some suggestions for?
Well, we want to make sure that we are prepared, first and foremost, from a medical perspective and a hospital perspective. I actually spoke earlier today with Mike Clough, who's the CEO of Cape Cod Healthcare. They are actually prepared to, for the influx in population that we see every year, and to provide the medical care that people need, both from a COVID perspective and also non-related COVID symptoms and challenges that people just have in everyday life. So that, I think, is first and foremost, but we want to make sure that we're vigilant there. I think anyone who is looking at this situation honestly knows that we're going to have a muted summer. The American economy and the Massachusetts economy is in arguably the worst recession that we have seen in any of our lifetimes. If you look, pick the metric, there's a lot of really concerning news out there. I don't think we'll see, even if people are able to return at some point this summer, I don't think we'll see the sort of broad hordes of people that we would see typically. And I think we want to be very cautious about what that is. I think that we can reopen in some ways, but to do that, we need to be following these public health precautions. We need to be communicating that information, and we need people to really be adhering to it, right? So there's a lot of talk about beach protocols, and we'll have those, I think, early next week. But it's really going to be up to the public to make sure that people are taking adequate spacing on the beach, that they're wearing face masks where it's sort of appropriate and necessary. It's really up to us in the public. There's no way we can sort of enforce or police all of this. And so that's why consistent information is just so important.
I was just going to run through a laundry list of things that I've been hearing on the street that people are concerned or have questions about. Of course, the first is beaches. We've got, Yarmouth proposing its own set of rules. We have, seashore, we have towns, we have, how are we getting some consistency in that?
I really urge towns not to go it alone. And actually, towns will not have my support if they try to go it alone on some of these issues without working with the Baker-Polito administration and without working with the Cape and Islands legislative delegation. We will be going as a delegation next week to all of our select boards to make sure that we are communicating this message, that we need to be working in partnership, that we need to have a uniform message to make sure that we are protecting health and safety. There's going to be some instances, of course, where just the situation on the ground is different. So when you talk about beaches, I'm really focused on us having uniform policy and uniform messaging as it relates to public health precautions. Now, the actual access to the beach, basically sort of who controls the parking lot, that's always been left up to either the town or the National Seashore, or in some cases, there's other ownership of beach access. And so hopefully we'll see guidelines come from the administration around how they can manage that. So some of those decisions, of course, will be made locally, but I really caution towns about sort of going it alone or trying to get information out there until we have what the rules of the road are going to be for the governor. We're going to have them early next week, and then we're going to work really hard to get that all out there.
Another question I've been hearing a lot about, and indeed Wellfleet this week, their select board asked the governor to hold off opening short-term rentals. So people are concerned on the economic impact, but even more concerned, I'm hearing, of the public safety impact of short-term rentals that aren't hotels or motels, Airbnbs, personal rentals. What is the thinking on that?
There's a lot of conversation around just accommodations broadly. Leisure accommodations are currently prohibited in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through May 18th. I suspect there'll be some sort of extension of that, when we hear from the governor on Monday. And there's a lot of conversation about how do we go about, from an operational perspective and a logistics perspective, making sure that shared living spaces, like whether they're hotels or motels or short-term rentals, meet certain cleaning protocols. Work actually in the industry has been done so that folks may be able to actually do that. But there's going to be lead time that needs to happen. I also think leisure accommodations is truly how we can control our population to some extent. So when you look at a second home that someone may own, or an apartment that someone rents for 6 months, for the season, we can't tell people that they can't sort of go to their own property. And I actually think that a lot of the economic activity we can count on this summer is going to be from seasonal residents who are going to, if they're not already here, they're going to be coming here. They may stay a little longer to ride this out. You may be someone, maybe you had a cottage in Eastham and you rented out 4 or 5 weeks of it. And then, you traditionally take the rest of the weeks of the summer to yourself. Maybe this summer you'll stay for the whole summer because you're able to work from home. So we don't have sort of specifics on what the leisure accommodations is going to be. I do expect, though, if you look at how the governor has outlined the phasing to date, and of course this is going to be a little out of date in a few days.
Even in a few hours, right? It's constantly changing. Yeah.
If you look at what we have today, there's 4 phases. Most of the economic activities that sort of fuel our tourism economy here on Cape Cod do not occur in phase 1. They occur in phase 2, and most of them occur in phase 3. So I think that the governor is moving deliberately and more slowly than quickly here. It's really being informed by public health, and I expect that we're going to continue to really move deliberately here, and we're going to really try to make sure that everything we do is informed by science, by facts, by morbidity and mortality data, and not by fear. But that's really hard.
Yeah, I know restaurant and bars potentially could be in the first phase in limited ways. And we saw what happened recently in Mashpee with the Polar Cave ice cream opening and the, a mob scene. There's no other way to describe what seems to have happened. How are we providing guidelines and how are we providing help in implementing, even during the first phase, the reopening of, say, a restaurant or an ice cream store?
Yeah, this is a real challenge, and my friends of my friends who've opened their businesses up have actually in some cases really said, "Wow, Julian, this is a lot. This is really hard to do." My friends who own Salty Market in North Truro opened May 1st, and they were providing both their grocery and liquor selection, which you could do either curbside or delivery, and then they also had their deli open, and they basically concluded that it was too difficult to keep the deli open and to kind of adhere to all these public health precautions. And so they're putting a pause on the deli. They're continuing to the grocery store. That is, I think, emblematic of the challenges that businesses are going to face in preparing for this new environment. So I think what's essential is, consistency and clarity on what to expect and when to expect it. So the ability to plan, the ability to figure out, do you have the necessary supplies you need? The personal protective equipment for your staff, protocols in place. Where do you get that information? What the task force is working to do, and the county is really taking the lead here with representatives from all the various health departments across the region, is to say, all right, we've got a policy for, outdoor seating in restaurants or beaches or what have you. How do we get that out in a uniform way?
Right.
How do our health agents and other municipal officials have information they can turn to, even as simple as like, here's a go-to beach poster you can use that you can get out there and print and get up on the beaches before Memorial Day. So that's really the aim of what we're doing, but reopening is going to be really hard. Sarah Peak has been saying this, and I think she's really right, that in a lot of ways, reopening poses even more challenges for us than closing down, particularly because when we had to close things down, a lot of our businesses weren't open, in mid-March. So this remains a really challenging, fluid situation. I think we're trying to make sure that if there's anything, we have clarity, there's timelines and expectations that business owners and employees can have so they can adequately plan.
Well, we are amazingly out of time. We try to keep these tight and concise. And I have been here today with State Senator Julian Cyr, who is the point person and spokesperson for the Cape Cod Reopening Task Force. Information changing daily as summer approaches and the COVID crisis continues to evolve in ongoing ways. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Teresa. Take good care.
Okay.